All right. Here we are yet again. Howie, it wouldn't be right if I didn't say it. You're looking more handsome every week. I love it. I love it. All right. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm very excited today about this topic, to be honest with you. Sometimes I get excited about what we're going to cover, but this time I think I mean it this time. I'm actually really excited. I think we've got some really neat aspects that you guys are going to enjoy. So today, as Tracy just posted there in the topic, the law of empowerment and how it relates to de-escalation. So every webinar, for those of you who just joined us for the first time, those of you who have joined us many times, thank you so much. Love to see where you're at, location there in the chat. I see it already popping up. Wakapa, Wapaka. I say that wrong on purpose. Amity, good to see you. Awesome. Thank you all for showing up. And every week we cover a different topic. Sean in Orlando, I'm going to be down there next week getting crushed. I'll tell more on that later. West Virginia's here. All right. Awesome, Trish. Fantastic. So the series, this series, as Howie knows, began when COVID kicked in and people were stuck at home. And we said, you know what can we do from the CCG standpoint to help give folks some extra information to add to your resume? Almost all of these webinars that we are providing, we actually are also providing a certificate at the end. Tracy will tell you how to do that, how to get your certificate. You know, some of us like to have certificates. Hey, you can send it to your boss and say, hey, I'm just not sitting at home. I'm actually taking some training and trying to increase my skill set. So we're happy to have you. Definitely. Oh, Montana. That is a place I would love to get to. I have not been out there yet. And Canada. Excellent. I love it. So this week, the topic, as mentioned, if you're just joining in again, the law of empowerment and how it relates to de-escalation. And so what I'm going to quickly go over, though, I want you to get the notepad out, get ready to take some notes, because, why else would you be here, right? It's not all going to stay here. But just listen to this first section I want to read for you, and then we're going to break it down. So in this book that's been around for a while, we'll just say, depending on your beliefs, I'm not trying to press any beliefs on anyone, but I think it's a really good book and it has some really good lessons in it. So this book was talking specifically in this one section about this guy who was pretty amazing, who was trying to empower individuals that were in his inner circle to go out and complete tasks. And in fact, to go complete these tasks with people that weren't necessarily always receptive to what it is that the message that they were going to be told. So in the law of empowerment, so this book, specifically John Maxwell's version, he talks about the law of empowerment, and he talks about effective leadership attracts and brokers the talents of others. And leaders must develop others to reach their potential. And in order to do that, there are these 7 steps, right? And so while I'm going to read these, then we're going to translate it over to de-escalation. So the first one, a personal call. Number 2, a direct commission. Number 3, a central objective. Number 4, a clear message. Number 5, practical credentials. Number 6, confidence for provision. And number 7, solid convictions. And like I said, don't worry about writing those down because that's not what I want you to track. But in this, I saw that and I went, man, these are some great lessons. And they were pretty effective at getting the message across. So I want to take that one step further and say, how does this apply to de-escalation? Because as we've talked about before, leadership and de-escalation go hand in hand. In leadership, you have the power to influence behavior, but you cannot control other people's behavior. And this is a key factor that so many people forget when it comes to de-escalation, is they think that maybe they're in a position of authority or law enforcement or what have you, and they say, I have the credentials and the authority to tell these people what they should do, to go to their room or calm down or de-escalate, lower their voice, all of these things. And we come at it and we attack it from a place of control, when the reality is it is about influence. So let's break down this message. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the personal calling, right? So it said here, a personal call. I consider that in relation to de-escalation is, am I going into this situation, which we've covered before, but with the right mindset? Do I have a mindset and a feeling in my heart that I have a mission. It's my mission to resolve this crisis situation. And I know for me that from a young age, I have always felt the calling and desire to calm situations down and be kind of I was pretty quiet until certain moments growing up where there were situations where I thought, ooh, I can step up and be a leader. And I would try that. And that's been in me since when I was a little kid. Now, I didn't always do it the right way. And over time I learned, through my mistakes. But the reality is I had to have the right mindset going into it and with the right calling and the right spot in my heart to begin with. Howie, what you got?
On that personal
Start
call.
over. Start over, my man. Just leave your mic on because it cuts off.
Okay. So personal call, right mindset. Yeah, I think the job you're in currently, you have to have that personal call, right? Or it's just a job. And you start to dread that after day after day. My particular calling into law enforcement, it was just that, a calling. It wasn't a job. And I actually had that same conversation with my son when he decided he wanted to go into law enforcement. I'm like, don't do it because of me. Don't do it because of these reasons. Make it a calling, because I truly got into law enforcement to help people, right? And in their time of need. That's when they would call the police, and that other things that go along with it. Yeah, that is part of the occupation, but it was truly a calling. And I would have to remind myself about that periodically in down times and when things weren't really going my way. It's so important that we remind ourselves about our calling and what we do. And I said it last week, and I'm going to say it again. The thing I try to remind myself of, and I have it written down next to my nightstand, and I read it in the morning before I get out of my room: be the calm, not the storm. And how many times do we come to a storm bringing our own storm? I mean, you got one hurricane, another one joins it. Now you got a heck of a mess, right? So right. I think that's important to remind yourself of your calling, and you're the calm.
Excellent. So the next one is the directed to a mission. So kind of going hands in hands with this. So you have a personal calling, but then what about the situation when we're voluntold, right? We heard that term a lot. When I was in the Marine Corps and going through boot camp, they would ask for volunteers. Oh, yep. Actually, you can kill it if you want. I think I hear your daughters. Sorry. But the question becoming, are we voluntold to complete the task when we show up at work, right? So we may start out the day with that personal calling and feeling it, but then we get into the workplace, and now the question becomes, am I driven to the mission of the organization where I am? So I may have a personal calling, but it's possible that where I'm working is misaligned with what it is that I want to do in my heart. Maybe I don't have the opportunity to actually follow my personal calling because either I'm just not at that point in my career yet, or the objective of the organization may not be in alignment, or I have to adjust. And so the other side of this was, again, so voluntold, or do I have the personal desire? And then recognizing that whichever way we go. So in our training, where we cover the funnel approach to de-escalation, which some of you here probably went through the webinar where we covered that, the funnel approach to de-escalation and crisis intervention, is we talk about that your care, right? So whether you care or not for the person in crisis, it is transparent. And that is absolutely, it's just something to remember at all times, that regardless of how I feel, it is absolutely transparent. If I care about the person in crisis, if I have that empathy and compassion, it will come across. If I don't, and I cannot put myself in that mindset or that heart position where I have some compassion and empathy for the person that's going through the struggle, that is absolutely transparent as well, and will often lead to escalation because the individual picks up on it. Howie, go ahead and give yourself a quick break before you talk once you go off mute.
Talking about that, it just reminded me of one of John Maxwell's famous quotes, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think also directed to the mission, we have to remind ourselves what the mission is. One of the things that happens in the workplace continuously is people with bad attitudes. We call it something else. It's really not a nice word, but it's contagious. It spreads like fire. And if we allow ourselves to be dragged down into that complaining, not, the upper echelons doesn't get what we do or whatever, and that becomes contagious, and it sucks our direction to the mission right out of us. And pretty soon you find yourself down at the water cooler with everybody else complaining about how it's not fair, it's not this, and you've lost your whole direction. When you walk out of your car into the door, your place of work, are you directed to the mission? Or are you already going in with a complaining mindset? So self-awareness and mindset, particularly when you're directing yourself towards the mission, is of utmost importance, because if you go in work with that attitude, this is going to be a bad day, I can't believe it, or you talk to someone coming off a shift and like, oh man, this is crazy, you won't believe what's going on, that directly impacts your mindset, and the mission gets pushed back, and we start to lose that. And like you said, it goes right on with your personal calling, and your mindset goes directly with the mission. If your mindset's not right, the mission's not going to be completed.
Awesome. All right, so the next one talked about focused intent. So in a mental health organization, there's often, you have caseworkers, you have, your therapeutics, so you have psychiatric folks, you have, all the different departments that usually come together on a regular basis, whether it's weekly, whether it's, every couple weeks, heaven forbid, but monthly. And we have that treatment team meeting where the treatment team would often come up with the direction, if you will, of what the goals were in treatment and what they were trying to accomplish. Well, based on the type of job you have, you may be in a scenario where you're working with the same patients over and over and over, and so you get to progress them through. Or you're in retail, or you're in law enforcement, or you're in a scenario, emergency services, where you don't have all that. You're literally you got 5 minutes to figure out what's going on with this situation, what's the context, what's the scenario, and how am I going to respond, right? But what we have to recognize is that what is the central objective of the situation? So we first start out with waking up and stepping into it with the right mindset. Then we consider, okay, what is the mission of the organization as a whole? What's the macro? But now we have to consider the focused intent. Is it team-centered? What are the goals? What is the actual goal of what it is, on a not a macro, and I don't want to say a micro yet, but an even kind of more narrowed focus. What is the goal of this situation? Am I simply just trying to get this person to take a few steps back and lower their voice? Am I trying to get them to move from this part of the unit to the other? Am I trying to, heaven forbid, but I'm trying to get them to put down some sort of weapon? What is it? Or is this in the preventative stage, right? Where we know that I'm in the right mindset. We know the organization is built around prevention and trying to stop crisis before it starts. But now I'm in the situation where I'm seeing the signs, the warning signs that a crisis is escalating and crisis behavior is looking like it's coming. And I am going to have a focused, clear direction to step in early and identifying what is the target that I'm going for here at the start of a crisis in the beginning of the cycle. What you got?
Focused intent. I really like this one. It calls you to think about yourself and what kind of employee you want to be. Because like you mentioned, the company has standards, but if you really look at the standards, where's that bar set? For the lowest common denominator or for the highest common denominator? So if you have these other three things, other two things in mind, your mindset and the mission, chances are the company doesn't address that to its highest degree. It really addresses the minimum. So if you're and I give credit to everybody who's been attending these webinars and on here today, because this is part of the focused intent. Education is going to be incumbent upon yourself. Don't depend on the company or the organization you work for to educate you beyond the minimum. Most industries, they educate to the minimum standard to get people up and running and employed. If you truly have a calling for where you're at now, it's, like I said, incumbent upon you to find other ways to educate yourself so that when you confront that crisis, you've done more than what's expected. So it comes down to where do you set the bar? Is it set high or is it set at the minimum standard, right? And I think most people in healthcare, first responders, and the folks that we have on here today got into a profession because they already had the bar set high. Because I think we in common have, in fact, that we care about people. We don't want people hurt. We want to intervene during crisis. So that is a higher bar set than the majority of folks that work in other industries, right? They don't have to worry about crisis. Maybe it's a paper cut or something, right? That's a crisis, or they spilt their coffee, whatever. We're dealing with physical human beings and folks suffering from either mental or health crises and having to intervene and bring that calm back. So I think it's really important that we look at ourselves and what have I done to further my education to become a better focused employee.
Nice. I love it. All right. Number 4, clarity and direction, and specifically singleness of message. So one of the pieces that is so pivotal during crisis, so now we've talked about the preventative side almost, now more during. How often, and I know you've seen this, and those of you on the call, I'm sure you've seen this, the lack of singleness of message. You get a person in a high state of crisis, and a disorganized team starts to have multiple people trying to direct the situation. Quite often, that is one of the absolute worst things that happen from a responder standpoint, where we are trying to respond to this situation and we all want to be leaders. We all want to step up and let the person hear from us what we think should happen. And when it starts to especially get beyond just the one person who's upset, but they start getting loud, it starts getting to the higher levels of a potential crisis and danger, is where you start to find more and more people, their anxiety rises as a responder. And as a result, we all start communicating at once. And the true danger there, without that singleness of messages, even if we're all saying the same thing, the slightest little variation could cause absolute chaos with the individual in crisis, because as their perceptual field starts to narrow, their tunnel vision and hearing acuity everything starts to narrow as they escalate in fight or flight, as they start to escalate in crisis. All of those things, their blinders start to get more and more narrow. And 50 people trying to yell at them and tell them what to do at the same time completely can become overwhelming and obviously become a very fast negative in regards to trying to de-escalate that situation. So the importance of us as responders having clarity in the direction that we're providing to the individual, and certainty as well. This is the other word that I love. I love those two, like those words to me, certainty. When I just say that word certainty, it is power. When you are certain about a particular thing, right? We have to be careful that we don't always, we don't say, oh, I know this or I know that. We always want to learn and be teachable. But when you recognize that you have certainty about a particular thing and you add to that clarity, think of those two together. I have certainty of my mission. I have certainty of what it is I'm trying to do for this person. I have certainty of where my heart is and what it is I'm trying to do. And I can link that with a clear and concise message to the person in crisis. That's powerful. So with that, what do you have, Howie?
This is probably my favorite of all of them, due to the fact that I have to humble myself and put my pride to the side, because my real life experiences with clarity and direction actually come from my wife, right? So she knows that I am one of those people that will cut her off halfway through what she's trying to explain. So the clarity she's trying to deliver is not there. I think I know, and it comes out wrong. So she had to start asking, can you listen to me till I'm done? And she started slowing down, which at first, when she was talking to me, and at first it was a real hit to my pride. But I had to do a self-evaluation to go, why is she doing this? Well, it's because the past performances proved that I was not clearly understanding the direction. So I think, you have to, especially with people in crisis, speak clearly and you're going to probably have to speak slowly. That's not our nature to do that. Because right now I'm like, Brendan, you get your stuff, get in your room. Let's go now. How do you in crisis translate what I just said, other than you hear possibly anger? So how do most people respond to anger? With anger, right? So I think it's very important when we're dealing, especially with people in crisis, that we give a clear and concise direction on what they want them to do, and then allow a chance to respond. The other part of this clarity and direction, which goes down a different avenue, is listen to what people are saying, right? Listen to what they're saying, so you're clear on what they want. Listen till the end and respond with the intel you collected, not listen to form your answer and respond. And you don't want to respond to what you think. And the only way you clearly understand, and it's clear to you, the message is coming to you, is if you give people that ability to listen. This is a sidebar, but when I've listened completely, it's given me the opportunity to restore my inner calm, because it could be half of what I heard that's really making me mad. And that's what I'm responding to. But when I've taken the time to think through what was said and think about my answer, instead of being all jacked up on the inside, it's calmed me down because I feel like I'm giving an intelligent response. So I think that's just a different view of clarity. And sometimes in crisis, we have the ability to cut people off because we need to tell them what we need to tell them now.
Excellent. Absolutely. So so it's not just the certainty and clarity that we have in ourselves and the message we're trying to get out, right? And that it just might be a message of compassion and empathy for the individual, right? But taking that time to listen. And a beautiful thing, Howie, so let me make sure I heard you correctly. Howie, let me make sure I understand what you're saying, right? And asking there's reflecting questions or clarifying questions to get clear, even though I think I know. Here's another thing for John Maxwell. I remember years ago, he talked about every time he had a meeting at his organization, it'd go around the room. Everyone would express, all his lead folks would tell him, and then he'd say, okay, what am I missing? He'd let everybody finish, and he'd give his response or what have you. And then at the end, he'd say, what am I missing? And it wasn't, but it allowed the people that were with him the opportunity to, in their mind, they might think, well, I told him this, but in his response back to me, he's the boss, so I don't want to question it, but I don't think he really heard me. So by asking them, what am I missing? That might be another thing too, right? I'm dealing with somebody in crisis and I'm asking them, hey, I think I understand what it was you're telling me, but what am I missing? And that might be an opportunity there. So looks like my camera's freezing up on my side. I hope my audio is good. Can you give me a thumbs up or down? Good? Okay. So it might just be video. All right. Next one, experience and credential. So the message before was practical credentials. So when I started in this field, right, I was 19. You know that. I was 19 years old. I'm 40. I'll be 46 in a couple of weeks. So I expect a present from everybody. So 19 is when I first started dealing with people in crisis. And literally my entire life, I have spent dealing with people in crisis, whether it was the Marine Corps, whether it was law enforcement, whether it was mental health. I've been in and around crisis my entire life. What I don't have is a PhD from a formal school. What I don't have is even a bachelor's degree. And I hate to admit this, but for me, I dropped out of high school. Some of you that know my background, there was good reasons why. What I have is a crap ton of street cred in dealing with people in crisis, but I don't have the formal education. Now, I've got some college credits and I've done some studying over the years for sure. But when you think about it, when I have gone in front of, for example, I won't name the state, but we did a presentation, an 18-month review for one of the largest states in the country. And it was from the Attorney General's office on down. and we were being compared against the other big boy companies in the industry. And one of the very first questions on day one of this 18-month review process was, well, what are your credentials? Where did you go to school? And right away, what did I say? And I struggled, but it was like, well, Martin Luther King Junior High. And like the group kind of sat back like, what did you just say? Like, we didn't want to know his high school, right? But the reality was I was solid in my experience that I had gained over the 15, 20 years before I had made it to that room, that I recognized my street experience and my experience in front of people in crisis was so critical, right? Now, if one day I had the gumption to really go and finalize that education, man, I might be really, really powerful, right? But the reality is in crisis, while it is so critical to bring a formal skill set or a street level skill set, what trumps both of those things are what I believe to be, and we talked about before, is that compassion and empathy for the person in the moment. You could have the biggest list of credentials and be terrible in your people skills, and nobody pays attention to you when you talk. Or you could have so much street that the individual, I remember working in the hospital, and I'll move on quickly, working in the hospital where there was an individual came in who was in a manic, he hadn't taken his meds, and he was a psychologist. And he was in the unit, ripping his clothes off, running around the unit, throwing feces everywhere. And this was a grown man who had a huge practice, but he hadn't been on his medication. So, you know, the level of being able to speak to him when he wasn't necessarily in his manic state was tough because he was very, very smart. But recognizing, hey, my compassion and my heart shines through. Howie, what you got? And then we'll roll right into 6 and 7.
And what we've done in dealing with people in crisis for myself over 31 years. And I think, you know, a couple quick notes are personal experiences are great to share in crisis. One example I have is we were on a barricade, and an individual was threatening to kill himself. And our negotiator actually was talking to him through a robot and was able to share personal experience. The guy was distraught over the fact that his brother had just killed himself, and he was thinking along the same lines. And it just so happened that the negotiator had just lost his brother recently, and they got into such a relationship over personal experiences. It ended up, I remember watching, he said, the officer, you know, put everything aside. I said, listen, man, if you come out and right now and I'm going to get you the help that I think you need, I'm going to come out and you do that for me, I'm going to give you a big hug. And we're like, what? And you know what happened? That guy came out and he gave him a big hug. So his personal experience paid off in a life-threatening situation. The other side of that is if you don't have personal experience, don't lie. Don't make it up. Don't get caught in a lie. I was doing one of our teachings at a call center for a large corporation, and this 19-year-old was telling somebody, you know, that he was late on his credit card bill, and the guy said, "Really, you know what that's like?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know exactly what you're going through, man." He goes, "Really? You're 19 years old? You know what it's like for your wife to leave you? You know what it's like for," and he just got blasted, right? So that was really good on both counts of how true life experience can pay off in a crisis, and don't fake it if you don't have it.
Love it. Powerful. Awesome. So we've got the last two, and I apologize I took too much time, but I'll just blow through this. Confidence in self and team, right? So confidence for provision. You want to be in a situation where your team has the training, they have the proper skills, and you recognize that, hey, is there a backup plan if this de-escalation doesn't go well? So we don't want to be caught in the crisis, then trying to go, oh man, what's our backup? What's the next step? And that comes through training. That comes through practicing with your team ahead of time and working through crisis and saying, what are we going to do the next time we have a crisis that doesn't de-escalate, that doesn't, result in big hugs? What are the next steps? And we want to know that and have that clarity before. The last piece I'll finish up here is setting the standard. it is so critical that we recognize you, me, Howie, all of us, we have the responsibility to envision and pretend that there's a video camera on you at all times. If you walk through your job and you perform or you're dealing with people and you envision that there is a camera recording everything you're saying, everything you're doing, your hand gestures, your facial expressions, your body language, all of those things are going to potentially be studied after this crisis. If you can keep that in mind and recognize, hey, I might feel like saying a certain thing right now, or I might feel like giving them a look or telling them what for, or throwing in a little side comment, and recognizing I have a responsibility not only of myself, my job, but the people around me. Because if I've been in an organization for a while and I start to show signs, you better believe my coworkers are going to follow suit. So it's a very, very powerful pieces here as we wrap up. Howie, I'm going to let you have the final takeaway so we don't keep people past their 30 minutes. What do you got?
Plan B. It's always got to be there. You nailed it 100%. It's got to be done in training. And it's just about every incident you've ever encountered with LE, and they say, well, what did you do? I reverted back to my training, right? And then the last thing I would say, which is so important, setting the standard, the role model for others. My question is, if not you, then who? Right?
Powerful. I like that one. That was a good closer right there. If not you, then who? Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. Oh, I love that. Have a plan C and D sometimes. Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a way to receive a copy. Actually, because you already registered, you are going to get an email of this webinar replay automatically. So just it has to process for a few minutes and it'll come out. Feel free to share that. We always encourage you to share it with others as well. We'd love to have more and more people get on these webinars. We do them every week, same time, same bat channel. You can join here. As long as they register, they will receive that email, even back to them if they can't get on at the right time. So we're happy to have you. We really appreciate it. We love talking crisis. If there's anything we can do as a company, please reach out. Tracy has put up there. If you want a certificate for today, just email Tammy at crisisconsultantgroup.com. Again, the email is in the chat. She will get you out a certificate. It usually takes about 24 hours, but we'll get it out to you. So outside of that, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Stay safe. And Howie, I really appreciate it, brother. Good to see you. All right. Take care.